a total of 6 bikes, 5 of which would be, have participants come and I would instruct to them. I've been a cycling instructor or a spinning instructor for 14 years, CPR certified. It's in my basement. I have access through my basement, which my garage is under, and then the front door, obviously. So 2 exits out of it. That's it. I have there's plenty of parking in my driveway to accommodate all 5 vehicles, so there wouldn't be any parking on the street. What else would you like to know?
Your best estimate, how many trips per day or per week do you think this would generate?
I would like to offer 1 class a day.
So a
That's
potential of up to 5 vehicles in and out.
In and out once a day. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I have considering 2 nights, and then mostly 3 daytimes, in the morning, 8:30 to 9:30, 5:30 to 6:30, 2 nights a week, and then Saturday morning. And that's it, so 6 days.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Questions from the board?
Is this a finished basement area?
It is, yes, it has, the walls are up, so yes, it is.
Well, I mean, it's just plain basement?
It's just plain basement.
Okay. Do you have heat down there?
No.
Okay. Need to see the plans. Is there, do we need to be concerned at all with any egress as far as
Life safety egress. My question was gonna be, or my recommendation would be to have maybe fire pop in and just evaluate, if someone were to get injured or, have a heart attack or something, you'd be able to need to get a gurney down in there to, and or treatment, available. So, I'm not quite sure. I'm quite sure that it probably fits all that, but it might be a good idea to just to get, fire down there just to, hey, can you give me, what your thoughts are?
Right.
And they might have some pretty good, inexpensive ideas,
Right.
Just to.
There is direct access to the garage, so the garage is also under the basement.
Into the house.
Under the house. So there's direct access from
I
the
see.
garage
as well as the stairs?
into, into the door, and the cycles would be right as you open the door to come into
Is,
the basement. They're right there.
that's an existing door.
Yes.
Okay.
Mhm. But that's a good point. I would like them to.
Well, they might give you some comment, that might help with business insurance purposes,
Right,
things
yeah.
that, some very inexpensive things that will offset any liability insurance.
Right.
Shaky. It's okay. How are you?
So is it your intention that the garage would be eliminated, or is it still gonna exist the way it is?
It's still going to exist the way it is.
And are those, where the black magic marker exists now, are those walls built, or is that something you'll have to build?
Those walls are built. Those are the walls.
So there's already a, 299 square foot room?
It is. Mm-hmm. Yep.
It's just, it's a semi-finished basement, and she's gonna repurpose the use.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Is that on the far left-hand side, if you look, it's, is that a window that you've got into the footing?
Over all the way in the
Yeah.
far. Yes, that's a window down to the basement. It is.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And you're intending to put at the bottom of the stairs, would there be a door going, or would that?
I'm gonna touch this,
Sure.
okay?
Yeah.
There is a door here. So here's the garage. This is the door into where the cycles would be. So the cycles would be here. This here is another door that allows you to go up and down the stairs to enter into the house. And this is the other side of the basement.
It's kind of a crossover there, right?
Yeah, and that's a window that you were talking about.
Okay.
And that little alcove in the garage, is that where your furnace is?
No, that's just a bump out in the garage there.
Is there a fireplace up above?
No.
It's odd. Usually that's where the furnace is and stuff, and, you know,
Yeah, no. No.
and your mechanicals are not in that room, or,
Actually, they are. They're, right about here.
are they enclosed or open to the area?
They're open.
Another suggestion, you may want to have CO2 devices, and that's the
We
life safety,
do. We
okay.
have a carbon monoxide
Yep.
device there, right there, to, alert.
And I would suspect that that's sprinkled right there, because most houses now with the furnaces are all sprinkled right there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There's sprinklers in the house?
Sprinkled?
I have
Sprinklers.
sprinklers above my furnace area. When they
And
built
smoke
it.
detector
A
and
sprinkler?
A sprinkler or a safety
But
valve?
there's,
carbon monoxide.
Sprinkler.
Oh,
I have sprin-
but there's also a
Aromatic.
fusible link
Yeah,
that kills the
firematic.
furnace.
Mhm.
Oh, I don't.
So I'm just surprised there's sprinklers because
Oh, I
most
don't know
houses don't have
if
sprinkler
there's
systems.
a sprinkler there or not, but
But
I
I know
know I have a
exactly what you're talking about. It's
carbon
round.
monoxide.
It's got a fusible link.
And it'll kill the power to the furnace, every
Correct.
furnace is.
Correct. And then if you look, most new houses now will sprinkle that area, because you're bringing in your water to heat anyway. What they do is they run a sprinkler there, so if it catches fire, it's gonna kill it right there.
News to me.
I want one of those. My house isn't doing enough.
That's fine, it's 99.
You'll have to move.
Or go spinning.
Go
You
spinning.
could do that.
Sounds like a good idea.
Any further questions from the board?
Has there been notice made to the abutters?
Yes. We have,
Here's on the form, it says a butter fees, $10 times the total number of abutters, and it came out to $24.30. I don't know how that works.
because I get, part of it goes to the town and part of it goes to US Postmaster.
Gotcha.
They pay the postmaster directly.
I got you.
Comes
It's
out
like,
to
how
$10.
does that work?
It's called fuzzy math.
Yeah.
All the fees are paid, everything is up to
Yes.
date. Good.
Are you entertaining the motion?
I would entertain a motion. If there's no further comment or question or discussion by the board.
I make a motion, we accept Ms. Roberto's proposal.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Abstain? Motion carries 7-0-0.
Thank you.
Welcome. So, we're all set with this application now, right?
Right, just sign that and then I'll send her a copy,
Beautiful.
signed copy.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming in this evening.
Thank you.
Good
for
luck with your
having me.
business.
I look forward to seeing all of you in the singing class. Right?
Right. That may happen.
Does the bike move?
No.
It just
No.
spins.
Just spins.
You work up a sweat and go
Wheel
nowhere.
does.
That's it. Kidding, that's how they can heat their house.
Yeah.
That's right, that's right.
No, it's not only heating. She's got generators on the back
That's what I'm
wheels
saying,
following.
right? She's gonna be off the grid
Use
before,
power.
You're
quicker
gonna make
than.
the light bulb. Have you ever tried to do that? To
Yep.
make the light bulb go?
Isn't it Lance Armstrong in the ESPN commercial?
I think so.
Yeah.
Sounds familiar, yeah.
Taking a break and shut
I'll
the whole
send you a
place down.
copy.
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much
Thursday.
again.
Okay.
Good night. Thank you, good night. Next on the agenda, the item you've all been waiting for. Discussion of the impact fee documents. If I can find my mouse. All this screen real estate. Here it is. Who's got the remote for the TV?
It was
Oh,
right
we're
here.
gonna watch
Frank's
Netflix,
got it.
huh? Cool.
Like it's just here.
No, that's not it either. It is Jumbotron, it's not my machine generating that message.
Trying to
there's-
start Netflix.
I guess it's time to watch TV, huh?
Yeah.
Not movie time.
Might hit the power.
Just shut it off and turn it
Yeah.
back on again, I guess, see what happens. You won't get any signal because it's not plugged in.
Oh,
Right. Fooled you.
fooled me.
Which file am I trying to open? Have we all had an opportunity to read the draft from Mr. Mayberry?
Useful help sleeping many a night.
Found myself trapped on an airplane with nothing else to read.
He is confirmed for the next meeting.
Good, thank you. That's the one.
Is his comments not available anymore here? Because it's coming up as not available.
Oh, really?
What was
Yeah,
that?
Mr. Mayberry's comments. Says, sorry, we're unable to find the document from the original source.
Oh, if you scroll down,
It's, yeah, it should be
Oh,
down
it's as
below.
in
It's
to ICS.
possible that I just didn't
Attach the link.
link
Yeah,
it
those-
correct.
those weren't linked.
Gotcha.
So down below, everything exists.
I try to do the hyperlinks in the text up above just because it's a little bit easier to look at.
Which one would be his comments?
Well, which one are you looking at first?
Well, at the top,
Russ?
well, I was looking at the top, it says school and road impact fee report, draft ordinance review, and then Mr. Mayberry's comments.
Right, so there's, yeah, because there's a couple things there. One is the methodology document, which would be the schools and roads.
Yep.
Is that the one you're looking at? And then
That's where I thought we would
Okay.
begin, yeah.
they're two separate, work efforts. So one is the schools and roads methodology, the fee calculation methodology. The other piece is back in 2012, the board started working on trying to update the ordinance and merge the two separate impact fee ordinances into a single one. And Mr. Mayberry provided comments on that draft work. So they're two separate but related.
See, I try to
Elements
open
to
up the
review.
school and road impact fees, and I also get it's unavailable.
Cause,
Oh,
well, she's
interesting.
saying you gotta get to these
Yeah,
down
just
here.
grab it from down below.
Which I can figure is the last document, cause it says Litchfield School and Road, but I can't figure out which of the other ones is his comments.
I can tell you those. Let me just get to today's meeting.
Two of these open.
All right, so. The one that's the markup on his comments on the ordinance is the one that says IFO review BCM planning, 05 December 2013. Those are his comments on the draft impact fees 2012, ZO Feb 22.
Which number down?
1, 2, 3. Fourth down is the actual impact fee ordinance draft.
Right.
Fifth one down is his comments on that draft ordinance. And then the last one there is his
Report.
school and road fee draft report.
Can you, what was the thought process of combining them? I'm just, obviously it wasn't.
Well, there are two separate work products that reflect
Two different.
outdated fee structures that need to be addressed. So we broke it down. Police and fire seem to be fairly up to date. They were done just a few years ago, and there hasn't been a lot of significant changes. But everything else needs to be looked at, with schools and roads being the high flyers that we wanted to jump into first.
Right.
So that you have on the screen, that's his comments on the ordinance. I would think that this is supplementary to his scope of work that he has with you. And most likely, the priority is his draft schools and roads fee methodology to nail that down, unless someone differs.
Which would be this document.
Right. That one.
Yep.
However, I'm sure on the 18th he can address either piece. So this is,
Schools and roads and proposed draft ordinance revisions.
but this one here, you know, the difference is, I've been working on the ordinance piece. He's been working on the fee methodology, so he's waiting for your input before he can take the next steps on the fee methodologies. I'm waiting for your input before I can take the next steps on the ordinance. And
Which is driven by the fee methodology.
only partially, not as much. So it needs to be consistent in terminology, but what you do with the ordinance is you simply enable the planning board and the selectmen to work on that fee schedule and setting the fees, and so those get done outside of the ordinance, and that's what he's trying to do there. That piece.
Yep. So have board members had an opportunity to review this document, and is there any comments, concerns, questions, items that we would want clarified or revised by Mr. Mayberry?
So one of the things you need to look at in the draft that he's prepared for you is he's proposed several different alternative methods in which the fee can be calculated. And so he's also given you some recommendations for which he thinks are the best method, but he does need your input, and you do need to look at and discuss what do you think is the right method for your community. And part of that, and he addresses some of the issues, is you need to make sure that your fees reflect potential growth or new growth, with the opportunity, though, that you can recoup some of the costs for investments you've already made to accommodate future growth. So there's some things to look at and discuss and think about, knowing that enrollment levels in schools are not projected to increase. They may potentially decline. And also with your, your road impact fees, looking at population projections, which aren't showing a significant level of growth. And so in a slow growth universe, to what degree is the imposition of impact fees rational? And to what, if you do collect impact fees, then to what amount is appropriate, fair, and proportionate? And so he does raise a few different points in here.
Right, because if you're gonna raise impact fees, or the thought is, well, we're gonna grow and we need more schools, but in reality, we're not, what are you collecting impact fees for?
Right, and so you currently have the situation where you've been returning your impact fees for the elementary school. And you'd been looking to zero those out, and so that's one of the things to look at. Joan has sent the draft over to, school department,
School board,
road.
and, selectmen.
For their input as well, as users of the impact fees, to see what might be helpful and beneficial, and that, I think, to include an invite to attend the next meeting on the 18th to talk to them directly.
Check that.
Have we received any feedback from the school or?
No, I just sent it this week.
Okay. When Mr. Mayberry had first produced his school's draft, separate of the highways draft, and he presented that to us for review as a first work product, I forwarded that to the superintendent and the school board. So, yeah, so it shouldn't be coming as a surprise to them.
Right. And I know Mr. Mayberry collected data directly from them, and so had spoken to them
Yeah.
in the process of preparing the report.
Yeah, I certainly wouldn't want them being taken by surprise by the effort.
Did you send us to the actual school board or to the administrator?
Well, both, the administrator, the business administrator, superintendent, the school board. I think he did have an invite for the 18th because Jack Pinziaro said he would come.
Okay.
Good.
So, page 3 gives you a summary of the alternatives that he's proposed for the schools.
So page 3.
And the bullets preceding that outline what some of those thoughts and considerations are.
Mean page 4, maybe?
The number at
three,
the
I
bottom of
see,
the
yeah.
page is 3,
Yeah, no, I got you.
sorry.
I won't.
Might be different, it might be the 4th page.
It's
in
3 on the
PDF.
bottom.
Oh, yeah, title page.
Title page, yeah.
So to do this, like all the subsequent pages go through all of the math that he went through to get to these figures. And depending on how you crunch the numbers, you get different fees based upon that structure that you create. So one of the options, well, two of the options are based upon structure type. One, it breaks it out by 5 different types of structures, and the other simplifies that a little bit more. And to do that, what he did is he looked at, the average number of children that are generated per household, depending on the type of house they live in. And so knowing that, that okay, a single-family house generates more kids than someone who lives in a apartment. And so structured the cost based upon the number, essentially the number of kids that might be coming out of that unit. He's also looked at it as the cost of K through 12, or if you were only to collect for middle school and high school, what just the cost per the middle school and high school would be. The other method is he looked at also based upon those two generalized structural types, the single family versus everything else, looked at the cost per square foot. So that being another indicator that the larger the house, chances are the greater number of kids you're going to be generating, therefore greater amount of impact. The other one was by number of bedrooms. Again, the more bedrooms, chances are the more kids. Just trying to keep that impact proportionate. The two that he recommended was either the fee per unit by structure type with 5 structure types, or the fee per square foot based upon the 2 structural groupings, as being what he felt were the most proportionate. Some of the kind of concerns, though, that he raised was that in the absence of long-term debt service, it raises the question of the appropriate use of impact fees received, and that there are only 2 years of debt service remaining to be paid on existing facilities. What he looked at was impact fees based on recoupment of a proportionate amount of past investment. So assuming that the absence of new debt service for school construction projects, the fee may be devoted to other school capital needs, such as such use of recoupment fees should be conditional on maintaining adequate capacity within the school system to continue to accommodate the needs of new development. And so this would be something that, having folks from the school department be able to articulate what those needs are, or what those investments are that they've already made, would be very helpful and beneficial.
Very much so.
Investments relative to growth? Investments relative to growth?
It's a proportionate share of the investments that have been made that are attributable to growth.
That's what I'm saying. It's the
Yeah.
investments we made without impact fees, the investments we've already purchased
Right.
that were due to growth, and we could recoup some of those monies
Or
proportionately.
anticipation of the growth.
Of the growth, right.
Right.
Right. That they took on their own and went and did.
Right, like
Yeah.
extra helmets for the football team.
Well, or it could be, just to be very simplistic about it, say, one of the classrooms was deteriorating and I'm being very hypothetical. That individual classroom had to be replaced. But instead of having space for 25 students, you say, no, we really should have space for 30 students, because we know that the class size is growing or could grow in the future. The cost for the additional 5 spaces, or those additional square feet, or additional 5 desks, or additional 5 textbooks, additional 5 computers,
Right.
that part could be covered by that impact fee
Retroactive, yeah.
versus retroactively versus the 25. I'm being very
I'm having a tough time
hypothetical,
buying
but
this.
The retroactive part?
Yeah,
Yeah.
because, that was built for a capacity, and I'm taking Campbell out of the equation for a moment.
okay.
But the capacity of LMS and GMS were already hit. And what we're seeing now is a decline in student enrollment. So theoretically, we've already charged for those 2 schools and shouldn't be recouping
anything.
anything.
And so that's part of that conversation.
Okay. The second part is Campbell. Campbell is, or was, at a point where it was approaching capacity as a school, but the core structures of that school were built to hold significantly more than the classroom, I'm gonna call it classroom capacity, was designed for. So the additional capacity is really built into things like the cafeteria, the gymnasium, I'm gonna say, stuff like that. And I'm not seeing how you could charge for the additional capacity, but we'll be paying it off in another 2 years. So I don't see, in fact, I thought, to be honest with you, it was already paid off or damn close.
It is,
Yeah.
this budget season was the one before last, and next year
So I'm
was
not
half
seeing
payment.
how we can charge impact fees for Campbell,
Right.
unless somebody decides at some point in the future, you're gonna have to do an addition to the school to handle additional students. But I don't see that either, because
Enrollment's
dropping.
declining.
Right.
So,
So that begs the question, should there be an impact fee for schools?
well, I had my opinion on that for a while, but that's just my opinion.
I mean, when the sophomore class leaves, they're the big one, they're 150 kids. They can drop 50 in 1 year. That class.
So, when he says here, it says the school facilities now have in place, have additional capacity to support enrollment generated by new development. Yeah, it's because we've been dropping for a while, so I can't see how we can charge an impact fee for new development if we're really utilizing space that was built and already charged for.
The only one that, Frank, I think that would be, because of the square foot requirement for, say, kindergarten, right? And so if, in the next few years, kindergarten were to grow, those kids, if they chose to build on to, say, GMS, because they're getting more kids, like, they chose portables because the state was paying for them. But once, like, in the next couple of years, when there's really such a drop in population that those kids go inside, if at that point they start seeing upward growth, then they're gonna have to expand for the growth, because kindergartners need extra square footage. And you need enough
But we've
facility.
already purchased the square footage for the kindergarten kids.
in the terms of leasing
In terms
portables.
of the portables. And I thought we used impact fees, maybe I'm wrong. Didn't we use impact fees
I
to
don't
pay for the portables? I know there was at least a request that we use impact fees to pay for portables.
I think the state paid them for 3 years.
Right, but I think after that, the school board came
I don't know.
to the town requesting impact fees for the portables.
I don't know.
So,
You would be paying for them twice.
who owns the portables today? I thought Litchfield
It's-
we're not renting them, right?
I don't know.
So it would be good to have the school board
right.
in the conversation.
Mm-hmm. But that would be the only way, the only place, because we have questions unanswered, but that'd be the only place I could see where that kind of building would be needed, because you have to have specialized rooms for kindergartners with access to restrooms and all these other things. If we own them now and have paid for them, that's a different matter, but
Well, if we've paid for them, then we've, in theory, purchased our space.
right, it's already done.
And
The
all
growth is
you're
already done
doing is replacing existing space
with existing,
with existing, and then you
Right.
can't use impact fees
Yeah.
for that.
agreed.
Maybe I'm looking at it
Well,
wrong.
he does address the portables. I'm trying to remember where.
Under Pete.
But that would be the point, though, is if they did use the impact fees, as Frank thinks they did, then
Right.
they've
I
already
can't
done it.
remember what they
Yeah.
did, but I thought there was a proposal coming to purchase the portables.
Right.
And I remember
'Cause they've
it
already
was
returned
discussed. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, what Frank's saying sounds familiar to me, but
Yeah.
I wasn't directly involved. I was
Yeah, Because they used to have two over there. One of them's gone, so obviously they didn't purchase that one.
Facility standards.
But I could have swore in the budget in and again, I don't know if impact fees were called to try to make up the hole that they used budget money for, but they may have bought it.
I think they did.
But I don't know if it was backfilled with impact fees.
Page 10, Jen.
Yeah. Oh, okay, there's also on page 12, so reference number, page 10.
Cost basis, it says. I did a search in the document for portables, and basically there's something on page 12. There's a note that these average values include portable classroom space now in service, which provides a portion of classroom capacity available.
And I know that the school has been using Fort Campbell impact fees to pay down that bond.
Yeah.
Based on the excess
Yeah.
core capacity.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, on page 13.
Yeah, he's talking about a second credit allowance, see table 13, is also incorporated based on the estimated cost to replace existing portables with permanent facility space.
Mm-hmm.
If they haven't already done so.
Right.
Or does he qualify it at all?
Well, he says, while portables now provide part of the classroom capacity of the school system, they are generally viewed as temporary measure with the goal of replacing them with permanent space. The credit allowance is computed under the assumption that state building aid would be applied and that the replacement cost per square foot would be equivalent to the cost assigned to the capital value of of existing permanent facilities in Litchfield.
That's a wrong statement.
I'm sorry, but I don't buy that you can replace the portables with, I'll call it a permanent structure, and therefore it's an increase in capacity that's suitable for the application of impact fees.
Especially because if the overall enrollment is going down, you open up capacity and you move those in. But the other mistake in here is, he may not be aware of, is that the state's already told us that there will be no state aid for any building at GMS whatsoever.
Oh,
At GMS, yeah,
Right.
but that's a separate issue dealing
Well, they were
with
talking
the,
about-
the water.
Yeah, but that was the portables. I think they're talking about the portables here. It could be at LMS also.
You know, we also
but,
have portables at LMS.
but at
And
GMS,
those portables were brought in to handle excess
Capacity.
to provide the excess capacity needed for the students that were growth. Students moved into the district, prompting the need for additional capacity, which the portables were brought in for.
right, to where to put the fifth graders.
Yep.
And it could be at some point in time, you're hauling them back to GMS because,
That would be nice.
yeah. You leave the kindergartners and the portables and you've got enough room.
To me, I think a discussion point is how he's considering the use of portable classrooms and the application of school impact.
Sounds like it could be broadly interpreted to
And
provide
I
funding to
think before we
build
start
on.
talking to him, we ought to find out, in fact, who owns those portables.
Mhm.
If we are renting them, then that's a different issue potentially. But if we have bought them, then I think Litchfield's put a stake in the ground and said, we're gonna use portables.
Mhm.
And replacing those portables, unless he has some way of looking at it that, I think, or would be eye-opening, then I think we're in a situation where replacing the portables with a new facility is out of our pocket, not new development.
Yeah, because it would be to satisfy an existing deficiency.
You're just swapping facilities.
Right.
You're taking
Space, with space.
a trailer, if you wanna call it that, a portable, replacing it with a building.
Yep.
But you're not gaining space
Right.
unless, I'm sure that, how can I say this politically correct?
I'm sure that the building would be bigger than the portables. I'll just leave it at that.
Well, even if you're adding capacity, it's, the assumption is wrong to begin with because there's a declining enrollment. So, I mean, otherwise you'd build a new building for no reason at all.
Well, I don't know how you
Declining
charge an
enrollment is
impact fee
declining
for
birth
decline.
rate.
Right.
I don't know how you charge an impact fee for declining enrollment.
Right, that's the
Right.
point. But now that we're talking about this, I am almost positive that they did in fact purchase that portable because the argument was, well, it's cheaper because we're gonna offset it with impact fees than leasing it.
Right,
Because leasing
because
it-
you're not leasing it, you're
Right.
paying,
Yeah.
you're paying the damn thing off.
Right. And that was the conversation, was why continue the lease for another year when we can use impact fees to pay it off and own it?
And then the question, I can remember discussing the question, or hearing the question discussed, that wasn't my issue, it was the school board's issue, is, well, what are we gonna do when we wanna get rid of it?
Right.
Because the useful life of those buildings, now that may be another issue, is the useful life of the building,
10 years.
but the useful life of a portable isn't that long, it's
10 years.
maybe 10 years, like you're saying, I don't know. Pick a number, but it's
Mm.
not decades.
Even though some have used them decades. Yeah.
Yeah. LMS.
She's not gonna want to collect impact fees for 10 years waiting on it either.
Well, you gotta get back in 6, so,
Right.
you know, if you don't have
So
any
you-
numbers
yeah.
showing increasing in the next 6 years,
You're
it's,
just cycling money
Yeah.
around.
yeah,
Which is where we are today.
right. Right, there's no point collecting for school if, there's no proof in 6 years you're gonna be increasing enrollment.
Yeah, the numbers just don't
Don't
support
support it.
increasing the enrollment.
Mm-mm. At best, it stays flat.
Yeah, we'd have to have a building boom and draw a lot of folks in for
Right.
enrollment to increase because the birth rates are flat or declining.
And that's certainly more than 6 years out.
What you had as a baby boomers after World War II were a huge boom, and then they had their kids, and now it's starting to
Yep.
narrow down.
Yep.
You've got declining fertility rates and increasing mortality rates.
Right.
Not because the rate of mortality is increasing, but because the proportion of your population, you have a higher proportion of your population that's older.
Well, currently, the biggest issue is the returning of the impact fees, correct?
That's not really an issue, I mean, we
It's
just
not,
keep
no, it's not an
returning.
issue, but,
To me, what's dumb is we keep collecting it.
Right.
but, well, but how long?
Having to manage that process.
Well, the question is, how long is the turnaround time if you need to go back to an impact fee structure?
When you start seeing the,
When somebody can start to show that there's a need for potential growth in the future.
Mhm.
Correct. And
No,
what-
I-
what- what
my-
is, and what's the lag time to make up for those types of
Well,
changes?
I don't know, but I guess here's what has always bothered me about the whole issue of impact fees has always been the idea of when you start collecting them. You know, when you're in a situation where everything's, you know, on a slope going up, it's easy to figure out you're gonna need something at some point in the future. But when things are going down, you know, how do you build a case, or how do you say a case that makes any logical sense that you need increased capacity at some point in the future? Yeah, I just don't see it.
I know, but I'm wondering how far down the curve are
Well,
we now?
the
It's been
issue-
so long.
Yeah.
well, the issue is,
That's all.
Well, they can track through all the grades, all the way back to probably first grade with some level of consistency and know that we're not gonna be increasing for at least 10, 12, 15 years.
the projections go 5 years right now. So when they do their projections, they look 5 years out. And right now, they're on a nosedive through those 5 years. So if you start seeing, you know, so next year when you do them, you use last year's birth rates and everything else, you start rolling. Once you start seeing that thing roll up, right? Once you're 4 or 5 years into that, the thing about it is, all right, so you maybe in the fourth of that 6th year, when there's 3 consistent years of growth, you start to evaluate it and you say, all right, maybe we should start collecting some impact fees. And again, you gotta base it on what, right? I mean, what are you gonna collect impact fees on if it's not due to development, but it's due to turnover in housing to where, you know, family with no kids moves out, family moves in, and there's no impact fee collected there.
Right.
So really, it's on development. So you may not collect any impact fees regardless of what the population's doing,
Correct.
you know, so after, you know, you may end up with a pool, you know, where you're returning it, you're zeroed out, and you're just turning over houses, you're not gonna collect impact fees anyway. I mean, you may assess one for any future development because it's on an uptick, but really, you're not collecting any because there's no development. So you've got a zero balance in there.
See, where this thing reverses is not gonna be based upon birth rate. Birth rate is probably gonna continue down, because you've had the pig through the python, which is the baby boomers and their
Mhm.
kids going through the system. Where this is gonna turn around is if and when the economy picks up, and housing development now accelerates.
Mhm.
And if housing development accelerates, and if it increases enough to offset the birth rate in town, then we will see a population increase where impact fees will make sense.
But that's predicated on your net migration rate.
Right, and people wanna move into Litchfield.
Right.
And then what is developable, right? So you see, if you see all of a sudden two of the farms sell out to developers, you may start, all right, what are they gonna build and are they gonna come? You know?
No, that answer, I didn't know the lag time and where the
Yeah.
projections, how far out.
Yeah, they go 5 years out, so. But again, to Frank's point, it doesn't necessarily tell you,
Understood.
yeah.
And you can get a fair idea by looking at the grades and entering first grade, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. Oh, you just ask Bill Spencer, he's a pro at it.
So, so what's worst case scenario to stop?
What do you mean?
To stop collecting.
What do you have to do to stop? You
No,
just stop.
he
No,
said,
what's
what would
worst
be the
case
impact?
scenario? If we- To
Well,
stop.
the impact is, the impact, in my opinion, is you just stop collecting the money for a new middle school,
Mhm.
which is, or a new, no, we were.
High school.
Elementary.
No,
yeah.
elementary.
Mm-hmm.
And, you end up returning what you've collected. I forget the exact number, I'd have to look it up, but we've returned a hell of a lot of money. Every month we're signing off checks going back to people, it's huge. You know,
And there's, and I'm sure there's a huge administrative burden, because I know we had to figure that out recently, right?
well, I mean, a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
But, I mean, if you think about impact fees as only being in our hands for, was it 5 years or 6 years?
Six.
But, you know, 14 minus 6 is 8, right? When did we have the housing go flat? 2008,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
There's fewer fees being collected, fewer fees to administer and
So
return.
we're gonna start exhausting those fees. And we haven't collected much in, I don't believe in impact fees in the past,
Can't imagine.
you know, couple of years. So I would imagine that we're starting to come up on a period of time where, you know, a lot of the impact fees that we've collected are gonna end up being returned, you know, in terms of dollars.
Right, even if we did nothing and continued to collect, there's no development going on anyway, so you're not collecting.
Correct.
And they're expiring, so you give them back, so you're nothing anyway. So if magically tomorrow, all of a sudden, we're on a steep curve, it's still gonna take you a while to have any money to give anyway. You have to have X number of, you could dump 300 kids into this district, but that doesn't mean that helps you any which way, you got nothing to give out.
Well, assuming those 300 kids come from brand-new development, and impact fees are collected on those brand-new developments, those fees do start to accumulate.
Right, but that's what I'm saying, if it's just turnover in
Yeah, if it's
houses,
just turnover in existing housing stock,
you're stuck.
you're using your existing facilities to meet those needs.
Right, and even if you had to build, you're not getting impact fees because there's none to have.
Right. The assumption should be that the existing facilities meet the needs of the existing housing stock
Right.
within
Well,
reason.
Yes and no. I mean, for a while, we were shortchanged grossly in town in terms of recreation facilities. Until they built this new field up here, I think that got us up to where we ought to be. Schools, I think, were probably okay.
It got tight, but
I
They're
think
fine.
we're okay here at Town Hall. I don't see we need to expand this. The only thing in question to me would be potentially the fire department, you know? And that, to me, is right on the cusp of needing new facility or not the new facility. And I'm talking a new facility for size rather than just to store the equipment to handle the town.
Right, rather than the need for 2 or 3 more trucks.
Right.
I think that if you stop collecting the fees, there needs to be some definable trigger that would somehow alert future board to then reinstitute or at least trigger a reinvestigation. So, I mean, I wouldn't just like stop the fees without some procedure in place to re-trigger it at some point. I don't know what that is, but.
Right.
Well, you'd have the board should be continually monitoring that and/or having outreach with the school department saying, how's it, what are the enrollments, and then with the Board of Selectmen saying, have building permits started up again, and, that's maybe what you establish in a routine question to those boards. Every quarter we ask them for an update or, something like that, so that we can keep our finger on the pulse of development and/or school, population
And
growth.
hence the warrant article for taking and doing a capital project plan every year.
Yep.
So this is where,
Which somebody argued against.
Yeah, because I think this board could do that.
so this is where, this conversation on this draft ties into his comments on the ordinance. And so one of the things that he recommended for the ordinance was not to narrow or be overly specific on what exactly you're collecting the impact fees for, but to say that those impact fees would be collected based upon this parallel fee setting process that you've enabled. Now, the one caveat he said though is, do you need town voters to approve collecting impact fees on schools versus town facilities versus fire and safety? So that was the one kind of clarification, but so what he was saying is, you enable the board to work with the selectmen to come up with a fee schedule and set the fee schedule. Then you could say, okay, as part of that annual review, we do have a methodology for schools, however, you have this set in that fee structure. You go through that review and say, we're not gonna assess the fees, or we're gonna just keep this tabled, or however, but.
Well, I guess the other question is, what does it matter if we disable them or not, because they're not collecting anyway, right?
Right, with the limited development that we see.
Right.
With the very small pool of impact fees that are gonna be ultimately returned anyway, it's just a,
Small number,
it's pretty much noise in the budget.
right?
Where that mechanism remains in place and available so that should there be a surge in growth,
It's already there.
the impact fees start to accumulate to
Mhm.
address the needs created by that development.
Right, and the plan, you just update the plan, but the point is the fee schedule remains, because, it's a dynamic thing where it just moves along and it doesn't need a trigger, because development happens, it starts to collect, or it just goes down to nothing. Because you're not collecting if there's no development, so.
Right, and the planning board reviews annually to make sure the fee structure does make sense with current economic.
Are we
conditions.
returning because of the 6-year window?
Yep.
What if that window were just to be shortened?
Well, we're turning for 2 reasons. The 6-year window, which is the mandated turnover point, and secondarily because we're not spending it.
I understand.
We're
But-
collecting in anticipation of something that will never be built. A new elementary school, which the voters a few times have rejected, and which now there's just no support for spending impact fees to build because of the declining enrollments.
You already have the space.
Yeah. Now, if we had a surge in development and we built a few hundred houses and all of those few hundred parents came out and voted in strong numbers to build a new school and use impact fees to do it
Well,
because
and
we
you
have
had
too many
3 kids in
students.
each of those houses.
Yes. Or 6 kids, let's say
Yeah,
a lot
right,
of
6
very,
kids.
very busy
Catholics.
families move in.
Well, if impact fees are in place, even if we're not collecting them because there's no new development, do the impact fees discourage new development?
I'd say not, because they're everywhere. That's part of cost of doing business.
Well, yes and no. I know a town that doesn't have them, but
Londonderry just dropped them and business picked up.
They do need to be set in an appropriate way to not discourage growth, but also to plan for growth.
Do the impact.
Yeah, growth impacts.
Yeah. Mhm.
So we don't want to do away with them entirely, but we want to set them in a way that we're not discouraging development for the sake of the impact fees. If development is going to be discouraged for any reason, let it not be for impact fees. Let it be for other economic forces.
Right. Well, and I guess
However-
that's why I'm wondering, what are we really accomplishing?
Well, but quite honestly, I mean, if, let's just say, the planning board or town collectively felt that, right, said, we don't want development, then that would be a way to do it. You know, you would just, that would be the way to do it, to discourage change in your town. So, whether or not we agree on we want more development or not development or this or that, the point is it can be used in that way to discourage growth or encourage growth. But it's a double-edged sword, you know, where's that fine line of,
Is it a club or a lever?
that's right.
Then the question is, I guess, if at some point we do decide to go back to impact fees for whatever reason, do we take into account what he's suggesting here, which is basically looking at all of the variables involved in adjusting or assessing? the
Yeah, I
fee?
like the square footage one myself. The square footage model to me sounded reasonable, but
Nah. You punish the people who are moving up and building bigger houses for themselves. You could have just a couple with no kids that want to build their dream house.
Yeah.
And you're spanking them for a school impact fee for not having
Right.
kids just because they have that extra Grandmaster
that's a good
suite.
point. That's a good point.
I want a Grandmaster suite. I don't want to be punished financially
Well,
for
just
it.
take it out of the kitchen.
I like the model of the 5 different
Types, yeah.
types approach. That way, you're collecting in a realistic and tiered basis for what the development brings
Right.
for, in the case of schools, for potential students.
I'm not opposed to that. I just preferred the other one a little bit better, that's all.
I know you just want to beat up the rich. You
Those
Democrats.
dogs, yeah.
So, I'm missing something here. We're not collecting impact fees because there's no new development. But if there was new development, we'd collect impact fees for infrastructure that we have excess of right now.
Right.
Right.
So why would we collect impact fees on that new
Because
development?
it may in the end create a need for more space. So in other words, if a development, you build a new housing development, there may not be any kids there now at all. However, the likelihood is that's gonna be filled with children, and you may need more capacity in your schools, in your roads, in snow maintenance, in all of these things, because of that new development. It may tip the balance, you may need another fire truck, you may need more police, you know, based on size and how much.
I'm just
How
talking about
do you
the
change the
system right now.
scale based upon how the demographics of the town are changing? By
well,
the,
that's what he's
by,
asking us to decide.
by the inhabitants, whereas we got now more 55 and older community,
Mhm.
where it's got equally devastating effect on the roads opposed not the
Right.
school system.
Right.
So it sounds like it's more just a waiting problem
Well, it is,
than it is a collection or not collection.
agreed, but this is more about collecting it appropriately, based upon what's happening, and the kind of development that it is. That's what he's looking to do, is shift it.
Right, right, so I think it's more of a methodology rather than.
Exactly.
Rather than getting so tied up in should we or shouldn't we?
Right, right. In other words, we should absolutely continue, because it doesn't hurt. If there's no development, it doesn't really matter. It's a moot point. It's only about when you are collecting, but then on the second part, it's a two-sided coin, is on the other side, you're collecting them, but for what? And so,
Right.
that's a whole different,
And by collecting them at the
Conversation.
rate that we're setting to collect them now, are we discouraging potential development
Right.
that we would find desirable if the
Right.
fee structure were not driving that away?
right, prohibitive.
Well, you don't even know if the fee structure
Yeah.
is driving.
You don't know.
This is true.
People could just be hateful, you know, I don't want to develop in Litchfield, because
There's no Dunkin' Donuts.
that's it.
No, but which again goes more towards, the other way of the methodology of weighing it. What is the real impact? You don't know until it comes.
That's right.
And that's where a report like this helps to
Ferret
guide our
out.
decision. Reading through here, there's a lot of detail of what types of development deliver what types of impacts based on pretty well-researched models. A single-family house is going to deliver more children than a two-bedroom condo, that sort of thing.
So to give you some comparison, you currently have fees structured at a single rate, and it's per square foot. It is not broken out by single-family detached versus other structure types. Just flat rate for residential development. And it's currently, when you combine the $1.17 for Campbell and the $2.65 assessed for the elementary school, it's a total of $3.82 per square foot that's currently being assessed for residential development. Compare that if you use, the K through 12 column, that is more than any of the three different numbers there proposed for per square foot rates. Another approach that he shows is to say, that today this is what your costs are per pupil. But he proposes on the right half of this table a 20% discount. But I don't know that the 20% has a specific significance. It may be a number plucked from the sky, but he simply, or elsewhere, who knows? But what he's proposing here is that if you are collecting a fee, you probably want to discount that fee because you're going to anticipate declining enrollments.
I think what's interesting is if you go to page 9 in his report and look at table 1-7, 1-8, and you can even go to 1-9, and you just look at the changes in the town. Over the years. See, if you take a look at, and you can get lost in the data, so I just took a look at K through 12 column, which is in the middle of the page. And starting at prior to 1970, you had an enrollment per unit of 0.263. And that keeps going up every year.
That is your current enrollment levels based upon when the house was built. So like my house was built in 1930. They'd go to the prior, my house would fall in that prior to 1970.
Right.
So the takeaway here is the newer the house, the more kids you have. The older the
Well,
house.
that's exactly right,
Okay.
and that's where I was headed.
Oh, sorry.
So if you look at this, I mean, you got houses in prior to 70, you got them by the decades, then 2000 and later. And it just keeps climbing.
Well, that's the, well, I think it would though, because would you have families moving in here and buying and building a brand new house? Whereas a house that was built in,
But if you think about it logically, you got a young family moving into town, they don't have a lot of money. I mean, it's not like the people up on Deerwood or whatever it is.
but they're not buying a fixer-upper. It's cheaper.
Picking on
They
Deerwood.
can't invest in
Well, I mean, just the people I know that live up.
in the rich neighborhoods.
But, no, the point is, the newer houses are gonna have more weighting than the older houses. So I'm not, I'm not sure that if we're gonna have new development, we're gonna have a huge influx
compared to the existing housing inventory of Litchfield. And
Are you saying that, for instance, it'll be, like, for instance, my house was built in the 90s. The influx of people may come into a house, an existing house, rather than a new house being built.
well, if they come into an existing house,
They'd fit in
then
here.
they fit into one of these categories. But what I'm saying is if they come in based on at least what the data seems to indicate, I shouldn't be, these data seem to indicate, I should say that correctly. Then what it is the newer homes that are being built will carry more load to the schools than our existing inventory stock. So the impact of development is going to be much greater than what we've seen in the past.
Or is this a snapshot?
Well, this is basically a snapshot of, as Jen said, of housing inventory compared to the load to the school, right?
Right, so he would have used ACS data to calculate these numbers, where they can tell you, they cross-tabulate the size of the household, number of children in the household by the year the house was built. And then he then adds on to that some assessing data.
But that just
But
makes
to your
sense.
point, Frank, or to that point, we would have to have, I would think, a significant amount of development to have an impact on the school system.
When you consider that there's a declining birth rate, yeah.
Correct.
Plus, this does make sense, obviously, because that's when the major growth in town was in the late 90s and into up to 2008. That's when you were really, really developing and bringing kids and family in here. And that's what we saw in school, too, is that high enrollment in those years. And so, of course, those houses built in the 70s and 80s, those are the people with kids that, those are oopsies, right? I mean, because they're probably out and gone, right? Then all of a sudden you're you're in that 0.4 there.
Nah, I bought a fixer-upper. Brought 3 kids into it.
Right.
Well, that's the other thing is, if you think, and where I was headed in some of this was, if you look at a young family who's gonna try to buy a home, to start a family, they can't afford to have the Ponderosa, so they buy a existing inventory, they
Right.
move into town, they have their kids, maybe they stay in town and buy another house, and move up, or move out of town, I don't know, but with the, I guess where I'm trying to puzzle this out is I'm not seeing, according to his data, why aren't we seeing increases in older inventory of the load again in the school system?
Why, do you think it's based on when the house was built, or just based upon a
Well,
a
if you look at his data, he's
timeline?
saying that it's when the house was built, but
No,
I'm
it's
trying to figure out why.
But isn't it more of a timeline?
Yeah, I don't think he's saying
I don't
that.
think it's based on year the house was built.
Well, that's what.
Well,
so
Jen-
much.
Yeah, but it is, but I don't think that's what he's saying. I don't think he's saying that a newer house develops more. I'm just saying, he's saying this is what the data shows, is that houses built here has this kind of
I
load.
think you got an aggregate average as the timeline goes on of,
Like, if he had data broken out 2010 and later, I think that number would probably be lower.
I don't know.
Or is he looking at,
I would say probably not. I mean, look at the trend.
but is he looking at, this
never
is what
gone
it
down.
was the day the house was built, not today.
Right.
In
So-
1970, this is what it was.
No.
Not for that house
That's not what he's
today.
saying. He's saying a house built in the 70s today has that impact on our schools.
Right.
That's,
That's what he's
Cross
saying.
purposes to what
yeah.
I'm saying, which was young families gonna buy older inventory.
Yeah,
So-
I don't think they do though.
Yeah, but I think it's related to the site. If you look at it, it tracks with the effective area of the housing. Is over the years, the size of the houses jumped dramatically, if you look. So, bigger house, typically more bedrooms. More bedrooms, more kids, more load.
So there's a couple things going on. So instinctually, you might think that young family would choose to buy the older house because it's more economical. I'm an anomaly. I did that I'm not normal, apparently.
We know that.
And we know that. Exactly. So,
It has nothing to do with house buying.
but, so another
buying
thing.
aside.
Exactly. So, look, Ari, so I'm going to use my neighborhood as an example. My neighborhood in 2000 had a lot of kids. Had, on average, if you looked at the city of Concord, more kids per household than a lot of other neighborhoods in the city. Now, we've got one of the lowest rates of kids per household. What it is we are now a neighborhood of empty nesters. So all of those people that bought those houses when their kids were young, they're still there in those houses. And they're older houses.
But that is a cycle.
It is a cycle, you're right. But where you now have the larger share of families with kids are in those new suburb developments within the city.
I ain't washing my own dishes, and I ain't, I'm gonna have a dishwasher, I'm gonna have.
Exactly. That's exactly it. And it's also, there's the Association of Realtors has out data that shows that while we think that folks are looking for smaller houses, it's not true. Folks are still looking for bigger houses, and they're having a challenge with younger buyers who want what they had when they grew up. And so they're still looking for bigger and better than what their parents had. And so you're getting more of those younger households that are looking for the newer house to purchase. And some of them are strapped to the gills in financing to make it happen.
I was gonna say that, down south there's a term called house poor, and that's what they are. They got a lot of house, but they got no furniture, and they got nothing else in it. But they got a house,
So,
and it's new.
so while instinctually we might think that that young household with the limited income is gonna go for the older house, it's not happening. Which is one of those kind of anomalies out there right now where everyone goes, okay.
That's
So
the
it's-
housing decline and mortgage recall, repossession.
Exactly.
And the fact that young people think they can have it all. I mean, they don't have that reason and that reason chip in their head that says, geez, I shouldn't overextend myself. Just go out and buy it, because they,
Yeah. Why wait?
why wait? Someone says I can have the money now, I'm gonna do it, regardless of whether I can afford it.
Right. Yeah. It's more fun than a fixer-upper.
I agree.
I'm
Just
with
to, curious to clarify, sorry I'm lost in this whole thing,
That's okay.
So am I.
but are we trying to decide here on the methodology, or are we trying to decide whether we're going to continue to collect?
Both.
Okay, well, it sounds like we really don't want to stop collecting.
Agree, because there's no downside.
It's more the methodology and how it's going to be weighted and how they're gonna be collected.
Right. I'm hesitant to
Or at
do away
least
with the process altogether.
Frank, you shake your head no? Or,
Well, I'm not convinced that we should continue collecting.
Is there
I
any,
mean, that doesn't mean some things can't be weighted to zero, per se. But the collection process potentially should continue.
Well, no construction, it is a zero.
Well, that, based on no construction.
I mean, if you're having a discussion as to whether we should have a methodology in place to collect, I agree with that. If you're saying we should continue collecting when all the data indicates that there is no growth in the town, then I would say, I would agree that we should not collect. And if you're saying that there should be a defined trigger that sets off collection, then I would say, yeah, I would agree with that. What that defined trigger is, I don't know.
I have a question, if there was development and as we collect impact fees, and we really don't have a need to do that, it's just because there's new development, is there a cost to the town? What's the overhead associated with
Well,
collecting those fees?
the overhead
and
is
that?
administrative cost of accounting for the
Process.
just accounting for the whole thing.
I mean, but is it any significance to that, or is it just noise in the overall?
I wouldn't say it's hugely significant because it's basically run on spreadsheets.
Okay.
And monthly, what you do is you have accounts and you plug in the interest in it, add that interest in, and that gets apportioned out throughout the account to
Okay.
whoever has money in the account.
So there's basically no overhead to do it.
I wouldn't say it's huge. In fact, I'd say it's relatively cheap per se.
And then once you've gotten rid of all of them, because there's no development, there's really
Yeah.
nothing.
Well, you look at the statistic, that the school systems are on the downtrend, continue to be on the downtrend and is gonna be that way for the next foreseeable future in the next 5 years. How about from the 55 and older communities? Where's that trend?
You mean with the kids?
With
They're
develop-
not-
No.
Right, I'm a development, with development, right?
Yeah,
Don't laugh.
But at
so
that point-
the point is there's
But wouldn't
growth,
we- but
there's
it-
growth in another area.
Right, but that's what you would do though, is you would collect on that type of development, because then it would impact your police, fire, that kind of.
That's where I'm coming from, where,
Well,
because of the methodology.
A couple things. First off, the 55 and older community was exempt from school impact fees.
I understand.
Okay, so that wasn't a factor. But they were not exempt from other facility impact fees.
Correct.
Such as.
And that's
rec,
why
Town
I'm
hall, and
kind
stuff
of
like that.
coming at it
And
from.
they would still be susceptible to impact fees going forward in the future. But the other thing to keep in mind is, we have eliminated adult communities. And
I'm just using it as an example,
Yeah.
more than anything else. As just that there are sectors that potentially are still growth areas.
Well, if there were, let's say the ballot question passed, multifamily overlay, and if someone wanted to build a multifamily, well, you would collect for that, and it would be divvied up for those areas that are in the process, in that process.
I think, somehow in this whole thing, and I think he did do that, was, he did consider multifamily housing,
Mhm.
3+ units. So I think that's necessary, it has to be part of any discussion on impact fees.
Mhm.
Whether we go forward as a community with multifamily or not.
Right.
I mean, it's irrelevant, we should still have a methodology on how to
Mhm.
address it.
Mhm.
Darn Deerwood Drive.
Hey, you can say that. My kids aren't in the school anymore.
Doesn't matter. I saw somebody, so what is it you want to find out? You want to find out I would like to hear him discuss, in my opinion, anyways, when he shows in front of us, what are the pluses and minuses of the
5 tier?
of the different systems that he's proposed? What are the ups and downs of that whole thing? I'd like to also understand, to me, from him, some of the answers to the questions we've just been kicking around is, with declining enrollment and everything else, what do you do about collection of impact fees? How do you collect impact fees and have that make any sense? I mean, I can look at, to be honest with you, so whether we do it by square foot or a number of bedrooms in the structure, I don't know. You can do it either way. We're currently doing square footage now, but personally, I'm not wedded to square feet, one way or the other. I just find it interesting that,
So just to give you some comparisons, he did reference the city of Lebanon as a good example for the town. Not because of comparable size of the community, but because Lebanon also adopted their initial impact fee ordinance and methodologies at about the same time that Litchfield did. He's recently worked with Lebanon to overhaul both their ordinance and their fee schedules. And so essentially, Lebanon went through the same process that you are going through. They were starting at the same point you were starting at and trying to make some of the same decisions that you're making. Also, Lebanon's ordinance was developed by the same author using the same model, same with the fee schedule. So it just provided a lot of comparability. I did give you some links to all of Lebanon's documents on their website. What they have gone with in their most recent update, which was 2013, to their fee schedules, they went with the square foot method that's there. They have one rate, period, for schools. They have a really nice...
Per square foot.
Per square foot. Yeah. And they've got a really nice, simple table that they include right at the front of that methodology document. They do not collect impact fees for roads in Lebanon, which is the next piece we haven't gotten to yet.
Right.
So I have written down a few questions that you've all kind of come up with in the conversation here that I figured I'd just kind of type them up and I'd send them along to Mr. Mayberry in advance of the meeting just to say, here's some questions that the board had during their conversation. So that it give him a little bit of a jump start in being prepared for the 18th.
Anywhere in your questions that say mass confusion?
I think it'll be clear. No. No, I mean, the questions really are kind of all over the board, and so I think will be clear to him some of the things that you're grappling with. I captured here the use of the portables and the appropriateness of impact fees to replace them. So, some of it that Joan and I need to follow up on with the school department is whether the schools rent or own those portables, and if they used impact fees to purchase them, if they were purchased. And then can you use impact fees to swap the portables out when you're not for permanent fixed space when you're not really adding capacity? My thought on that, just kind of really quickly, is that the portables, if you were to replace them with final space, with permanent space, is that the portables were temporary, and so the cost to get to meeting that final end capacity enhancement was the portables plus construction. I wouldn't say that it's necessarily a swap, but it was
So you're saying the rental plus what the inevitable construction was is the final?
That might be where he's going with it, that it's a possible.
I maybe could see that if you indeed did build those, but if
Right.
you've gone beyond your capacity and now you're on the downswing.
Exactly, then it's a whole moot point.
It's moot.
Right.
Can I go backwards for a second?
Yeah.
Did I misunderstand when a comment came out that impact fees can be indirectly used to promote or not promote growth?
To promote growth?
It is known that impact fees can be seen or can be a deterrent to growth.
Oh, I see.
And when a developer is looking to build, it will look at, it doesn't care whether they don't care whether they're building in Litchfield or Londonderry or Merrimack or whichever town. They're saying, what's my bottom line?
Right.
What's the cost of the land? What's the cost of doing business?
And does the
And what's the cost of
town
getting the
use
job done?
that appropriately or inappropriately in directing
Can I sell it?
growth or indirecting growth? Or am I misinterpreting some of what the conversation is?
Legally, school impact fees are only to help the town provide adequate facilities and to ensure that any new growth contributes to the meeting of that new growth and new capacity that's required. Using impact fees for another purpose would be inappropriate.
Yeah, but I think there's like a ripple effect too, because impact fees, you know, a developer's not gonna just take it out of his bank account and pay the impact fees. He's gonna pass it on to the home buyer.
That's right.
That's
So if
exactly
you're
right.
assessing, for the purposes of school, I understand that the other infrastructure needs, has to have impact fees. But for school fees, if you're gonna assess $5,000 or $6,000 on top of that cost, that's adding to the cost of the building for the people that wanna buy it as well. And if you're doing that for no reason other than to collect impact fees, when in fact you already have a surplus of
Space,
of
yeah.
room for schools, et cetera, because of this kind, it doesn't make any sense to me. I mean, to do that.
So that gets at the next question that I wrote down, which is the validity of collecting an impact fee when faced with declining enrollment. And then the next question I wrote was, what are the projected enrollment numbers? Because that's not included in his report. And then the last piece I wrote down was, can the fee structure include a trigger? So that something that says, you know, if our growth rate, if we got extremely slow, low, no growth rate, there is no fee collected. However, if the growth rate reaches, you know, X point, then can you have something in there that would flip the switch and trigger the collection of impact fees, so that you're now back at a point where, whoa, wait a minute, we do have some growth, we may have some need for future capacity enhancement.
But it depends where your starting point is. I mean, if your building is at 20% capacity, but you see a 60% growth over the next 3 years, that just gets you to kind of full. You know what I mean? It still doesn't give you the need to build anything. You've got capacity.
So the question is what would be, how would trigger be
designed, yeah.
appropriately designed, and what would be the trigger? So that's the other question that
Did
I
you build
had
that
written
building intending it to handle future growth or to address prior growth with funding from that prior growth? And if it's to address future growth, do you want to get compensated for that investment from the future growth as it arrives?
Well, you have to be able to show that there's going to be future growth, because
Yeah.
if the model shows that in 10 years, it's, you know, it might be stable then go, I mean, that makes your decision for you. Then you argue in front of the Board of Selectmen, look, here's our data. It shows that, you know, in 10 years, we're going to be, you know, at 200% capacity. Well, we need to start collecting impact fees.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean you'll use them.
Right, but at least you have
That's-
that defined parameter to work against.
Right. That hard stuff, yeah.
Yeah. We want to move on to roads?
roads.
ROADs.
Roads. That picks up on page 20.
Some of the big differences, just to kind of get it started, these proposed here is a extremely simplified version of the road impact fee structure based upon use. This one here, he doesn't have kind of the summary right up front. I'm trying to think if he had a side-by-side comparison. He does two different models. He's got Model A, which starts on page 23, based on lane miles, which I believe is what you currently have, and then he has Model B, which starts on page 28. He then, and that's based on per new trip, and to calculate per new trip, he uses population projections. I'm not sure what the source is of the population projection he used for 2030. It may have been actually mine. I gotta look. And now that I say that, and then he does an alternative, a B2, based on the OEP projections, which show a lower projected population for 2030.
I'm somewhat confused after you read through his introduction to this.
Yeah.
Before he goes into the section 3, the impact fee models, as to how he can justify the use of impact fees to do preventative maintenance on the roads.
I'm not on the right page
I thought you couldn't do that.
It may help defer the need for more expensive treatments such as full reconstruction of the roadway. Reading from
Seems to me
page
he's
21.
indicating that you can. and I'm-
I thought maintenance and service was not allowed for impact fees.
I'm with you, but I'm just saying that he seems to be proposing, if I'm not mistaken, that
Because otherwise, it's maintenance and service on all the other things.
I agree, Joel. We are compadres in this.
Okay, this is not a deal with drive thing.
No. If you read what he says, I mean, he talks about all the different lineal feet, lineal miles, all that fun stuff, and then he goes on.
So you could almost make an
Are we paying
argument.
them by the pound for the document? Is that,
Oh.
that's fair?
I mean, you could make an argument. Say the development is on the south end of town. How much impact is that really gonna have on, say, the northern end of town, What, beyond 3A? Who's gonna be riding all these
But he
roads?
should only then, and I haven't, to be candid with you, haven't studied this in great detail, but he should only then be,
Pinpointing.
no, he should only be charging impact fees for the incremental degradation,
Mhm.
I'll call it, of the road, created by that new development. But again, I'll go back and say, I don't understand how you charge for maintenance of something. You're not increasing the capacity of it.
Right.
Right, crack and seal doesn't fit that.
No.
And he speaks of crack and seal and other preventive maintenance things. Again, you're not creating a 3-lane highway out of Albuquerque.
No, if you're expanding lanes because you needed the extra space for, the 200,000 homes that are being built in the
Right.
north part of town to get to the south part of town, that's
Right.
a different story. But that's not what's happening.
No.
But by maintaining the infrastructure you have currently, even if the fee structure is paid for in part by the people who
No,
are- by the development that's,
completely in contrast with what
Now-
what we understand it's supposed to be.
Yeah. Well, and if, let's just, again, we go back to, maybe one of the town, or one of the farms gets developed, right? And you have, or let's just say St. Francis Way, right? So that whole field on the side over there, right? Say you've got to make a new public road that goes down and around there that isn't part of the development. Okay, I can kind of buy that.
Absolutely proportionately.
Right. To that,
Proportionately.
He seems to say in his first section on page 20, it says that road impact fee basis
discussed in this chapter is limited to improvements occurring within the Class 5 road system and the related right-of-ways. Repaving a road, crack sealing a road, to me, isn't an improvement.
Right.
That's maintenance.
Yeah.
It's maintenance.
To preserve the functionality of that asset for a longer period of time.
Which is
That doesn't-
which is not what impact fees are
That's
for.
right. You can't rebuild.
Trying to read into this whatever I can.
No, but I mean,
But yeah,
I mean, you still want to start taking the schools into that.
You can rebuild the
case.
boiler, right?
Yeah.
You're gonna convert it from oil to gas. That doesn't.
Yeah, I mean, it's outdated. We need a new air conditioner.
Yeah, but I would grant them the consideration that, okay, we've got a, no, I'm gonna go off the deep end on this, but we have a, this big a boiler, and we know we're gonna replace it, but we're gonna probably potentially put a new addition on the school, so we're gonna get this big a boiler. That incremental increase, to me, could be impact fees, because you're buying capacity for future use.
Right, the incremental cost to get you from a light boiler
Well,
to
as you
that next
say,
size.
widening the road.
That's right.
Or widening the road.
That's right.
But not filling in the cracks that are existing
Adding a softball
as a
field.
result of wear and tear.
Right. I don't even believe that buying a salt or buying a,
No, it didn't.
whatever, is an impact fee issue, but that's just me.
No, it's interesting that that's in there.
People will put it in there as long as they can get away with it.
I'm reading through the statute.
And if that's what
I'm
fees are
reading
being
the
used for,
statute on it,
if that's
yeah.
what the fees are being used for, what happens when those dollars go away?
That's right.
Tax hike.
In fees, yeah,
Oh, yeah.
impact
Right?
fees are an indirect tax. I mean, it's.
No, but, well.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
the other would be more direct.
Right.
Well, it's the downloading of costs again. I mean, if you look at it's the same thing with the state government downloading costs on us.
But some of these, like, obviously I live off Century Lane, but Century Lane, you're not building any more houses there. So there's not gonna be any real development there that impacts, some south side development's never gonna impact Century Lane. How can you? Cutler Road, you can almost argue, maybe.
Well, the only thing I can see us potentially building in the future would be an extension of Albuquerque. Okay, from where it stops now, down at Page Road, either straight across and then down to 3A,
Mhm.
or straight across and back up to 102 somehow.
Cutler Road bypass.
Yeah.
Right, basically, it's a Cutler
Right.
Road bypass for all practical purposes. And that would complete Albuquerque, but it's the only town road I can see us considering building in the future.
Using impact fees based upon development of that land.
Or development of any land that would generate traffic in that,
Right.
in that part of town.
Right, because people will be going southbound though.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, you could use,
Multifamily, huh?
Yep, yep. Agreed.
but all I'm saying is, that's the only road I can see the town paying for.
Mhm.
All the other roads in town have been built by developers. We have not built any of the roads, with the exceptions of Albuquerque.
Jen looks troubled.
No, I'm just trying to read through.
And stay awake.
Riddle me that.
And your answer, Miss Susan, is in the form of a question.
We'll get back to you.
Yes.
Will we get back?
Is this the daily double?
Yeah.
Commercial break.
Oh, my goodness.
I just don't understand how he's doing impact fees for, like I said, road repair.
Well,
Road construction.
Yeah, no.
okay, so this is me like,
Well, Jason Hoke has those same comments.
Yeah.
Somewhere in there.
so this is me putting on my, okay, let's see what says it can't be, hat. So, in the statute, I'm gonna go back to where I found.
everything I ever read was,
No.
Right.
There's like the
Service
actual
and
line I
maintenance.
wanted to
No.
use here. All right, the amount of any such fee shall be a proportional share of municipal capital improvement costs, which is reasonably related to the capital needs created by the development. So, maintaining your infrastructure system is a capital cost.
well, then that would flow
And
all
a
the way
proportionate
through
share.
schools.
No, it is not a capital cost. It is
Alright.
not defined.
That-
Maintenance of a road is not a capital
Capital
cost.
improvement cost?
No,
No.
a capital item is a
It's a
item that
new,
is purchased.
based
with
on
a
something
defined-
new.
Defined life and
Plow
a
truck.
defined value.
Sander.
Otherwise, you go to do all the service and maintenance in the schools.
Yeah.
It's whether it's a depreciable asset or not.
All right,
But if you go to that RSA on that, the first line in it, imposed upon development.
Well,
Yeah.
imposed by the development on the town, right?
So repair,
Needs
it's not
occasioned by
imposed by
that.
development.
Well,
the construction or improvement of capital facilities owned or operated by the municipality, including blah, blah, blah.
And you've also got to understand the legal definitions of improved. That doesn't mean I made it better. It means, an improvement is an actual capital expenditure that
Adds.
adds to the value. And in this case, you need it for growth.
Right.
Mr. Mayberry's got some explaining to do on this.
Explain.
How, yeah.
Well, I'm interested, you also said what I found fascinating, was that Lebanon doesn't collect roads, right? I'm wondering why.
They got no roads.
Yeah.
They collect schools, recreation, and police department. I think just kind of skimming through what Lebanon has, I think they have some specific costs that they've identified in their CIP that are specific projects to meet future needs, and those are the things that they've programmed in impact fees to help offset the
Right,
cost.
and that's classically the way Litchfield's done it, is we've always listed in the capital improvement plan what we consider as capital needs that have to be charged or impact, against which impact fees will be charged for. And,
Have they all been based on growth?
yeah.
Yeah.
And the use of fees for other than those capital costs, up until our new attorneys, has never been an appropriate use of the impact fees.
Is there something to
I
be,
personally
is there something to
disagree
be
with
said
you.
with the additional wear and tear that a new development might put on?
Well, that, to my thinking, Bob, that's the only thing I can see he's going after.
The incremental cost is exactly what he was talking about. So 200 new cars.
No, I understand that. That's what was my question, is that what, but he doesn't make that clear here at
No, he
all.
doesn't.
No, and that's my concern. I don't, he doesn't lay out for me, and at least in my brief reading of this, his logic in terms of being able to do that. Right, Counselor?
But
I guess it's a
even-
question of how would you define an improvement?
Even given that line of thinking, though, that's not really, new growth. The road's there. I mean, for practical purposes, it's already been paid for by previous impact fees, right?
Oh, yeah. Somehow it's been paid.
I'm sorry?
Somehow it's been paid.
So somehow it's been paid, at some point in time, bang, it's been paid for. And it's a legal question, are impact fees for new development then charged and being used by that road just because of the additional wear and tear that's generated? Is that a reasonable thing to do.
I'd like to hear Mayberry explain why.
Okay.
You know, now, I think partly to Joel's point and partly to your point, if we had built Albuquerque as a 4-lane road, right, with 800 people in the town, there is a future anticipated need for a 4-lane road in Litchfield
Right.
that we could charge impact fees for. I would agree with that. But you got a road that was built to handle the capacity of today. And I don't see any studies in here where he talks about we've overbuilt the size of the road, the capacity of the road,
To then reimburse that
Right.
size.
to reimburse it. So I can't see other than the fact that he's trying to charge the incremental wear and tear on the roads that we have to pay money for to upkeep the roads. I just don't understand.
That's a difficult answer, or question to answer, because, you know, that neighborhood is full of big souped-up four-wheel drives, you know, or they all got, you know, small cars with 15-inch wheels. I mean, how do you determine that number, that incremental cost? You can't.
I mean, he references this 2002 road condition survey
Right.
that was done. You know,
And to be honest with you, I don't know how good that study was.
Well, it's 10 years old, I'm 11, 12 years old.
Right. I can remember the study being presented to the board.
The data in that 12-year-old study is, you throw it out.
between 2008 and early 13, town has completed many of the projects listed in the original schedule. The first 5.5 years of project listed in the 10-year plan have been addressed. Further improvements about 12.5 miles of roadway.
See, the thing that keeps from it, you know, that could ripple right back through to the school thing again, because you got additional wear and tear on the building and the decks and the heating
Yeah.
and everything else,
It
you know,
goes-
and
It's an open door for everything.
so it just doesn't make sense.
There were more warm bodies, so we needed better air conditioning.
There you go.
Okay.
It might be a good idea to have someone, when he comes, maybe have someone from the school come in.
Yeah.
Because I think we may need their input on this, I don't know. Or at least have them, give them the opportunity to do
Yeah,
that.
he wants to fix up the roads with impact. Gotcha.
So. Obviously.
Is there anything you want me to pose to council in the meantime as well? Regarding the legitimacy of,
But what about the issue of the, you know, maintenance versus improvement? That would be an interesting issue to ask.
And if it applies to roads, can it also be applied to schools and anything else? How big of a can of worms does it open?
I mean, if you go look up, there's a dictionary for, you know, just about anything nowadays. When you go look up improvements in that language for capital improvements, it tells you exactly what that means. I mean, because it doesn't mean the same for every application, but
Right.
I've done it. You can go look it up, and it tells you exactly what a capital improvement means. And it's specific, you know, like, I remember it. I think it specifically says, not maintenance. I wrote it down one day and had a conversation in front of the Board of Selectmen about it. It certainly does not include your regular operating maintenance of
But
anything.
It sounds like Mr. Mayberry is implying that some of that could be offset
Mhm.
through impact fees. And if that's the case for roads, would that also be the case for capital facilities? Could we get a new floor in town hall from all the extra feet walking
That's
across
the
it?
point. No, I think I think he's making that case. I just don't think it's right.
Right. If he makes that case in one venue, will it apply across the board to everything? Will the schools be able to leverage that, the town facilities?
Mhm. We need to ask that question, where he's basing his
Yeah.
statement on.
And, you know, how broadly interpreted could it be? How big of a can of worms is it?
Because I believe Londonderry just had to return 1.4 million
Sure.
There was a big number of impact fees because they were improperly applied.
Well, Londonderry screwed up. Their past town administrator wasn't accounting for stuff and doing all types of fun things, from what I understand.
A cautionary tale.
So they hired a guy from Litchfield.
We have smart people here.
They also have a different, I think, do they have like a council or something? It's not a,
And their charter.
And their town
they're-
council.
yeah, yeah.
Some roads.
Were there any other questions on the road piece? Maintenance question aside, looking at the two different methodologies, lane mile versus trips. I mean, to me, to be honest, they came out with almost identical results. They didn't seem to be drastically different. It just seemed like there was slightly less math on the trip version than there was on the lane mile version to get to the end result. That was one of the things proposed here. The other thing proposed here was his reduction in categories. In the past, you had a list of different land use types that was a page long that had a different impact fee rate for every different land use type. I mean, he has drastically shrunk that down to where's the final, you've got your residential breakouts, and then you have retail and restaurant, office and general commercial, and industrial and storage. The three categories. Is that going too far?
No, I think it's long overdue to
Yeah, I
simplify
think
it
so.
to like
Yeah.
this.
Alright.
Can I, should possibly go back to the road?
We are on the road.
Yeah.
No, but
Oh,
just-
the maintenance.
Yeah. If you look on page 35, which is the last page of the document, one of the things he says that scares me. It says in section 5, summary of draft road fee calculations. Or it is saying Litchfield calculations. It says the models discussed in this chapter suggest that a reasonable road impact fee for a single-family home would probably fall in the range of $1,500 to $1,700 per unit. And this is what scares me. Provided that the town makes a consistent investment in road improvements that is somewhere between $350,000 and $400,000 per year in its road reconstruction overlay program. The only time we ever spent that much money was when we had saved up the road impact fee funds and spent them on the bigger projects, such as the reconstruction of Albuquerque that we needed to do and stuff like that, as well as the culvert replacements that were done in Albuquerque.
Right.
We're not spending that much now. We're only spending somewhere in the neighborhood of $170,000 a year. So if he's basing this upon an investment of the town of $350,000 to $400,000, his numbers are at least double
What we are now.
what they should be.
Well, and that kind of goes back to some of the comments that he made on page 23 that looks at based upon what the inventory is and what the anticipated number of years it would take to address all of the needs in the inventory. He's saying it'd take 27 years at the current funding rates.
Well, I know
cycle
where some
through.
of that number came from, and I'm guessing that came from the town administrator. And the road agent, they seem to have well, let me see if I can phrase this right. They have a wish to double the highway block grant funds, which would account for roughly this number.
We'll double what we have, including the block grant funds.
Well, to take the highway block grant
Right.
funds at roughly $170,000
And double it.
and double it.
Right.
And that would give you
That number.
roughly these numbers.
I just wanted to make sure it was clear for you, because it sounded like they were going to double the highway block grant funds.
You can't.
Well, you can't, right,
So the only way to double that is to do an
Tax it.
additional appropriation,
taxes.
either through, well, one of the way or the other, it comes through taxes, but to do it either through existing fund balance or to do it through appropriation.
Whether it be a bond or.
And I'm just saying, personally, I have my own opinion on it, but I don't think that level of commitment is gonna be sustained.
So those numbers are, the impact fee numbers then are arbitrary. Because they're based upon a number that,
Well, I don't know, I mean, he's saying that
No.
1,500 to 1,700 per unit makes sense if the town continues to provide 350 to 400,000 per year in reconstruction.
So we don't end up in a deficient condition with the roads, where the
And
roads are
so that,
crumbling, we wanna use
Well, I don't
impact
know.
fees to fix them.
well, he's supplementing the road construction using the $350,000 number. So he's supplementing it with road impact fees, but that's a maintenance of your road thing again. So we're back to this. Yeah, we need to collect this much impact fees to supplement what you're already doing to do road maintenance. And if it's not 350 and it's 170, then those impact fees should be raised to another level to supplement, to get on this schedule.
Or those
Is what
impact
he's
fees are
saying
having to
is the
spend.
town
Again, until
needs to
you
provide
realize
that, or is he
what you
saying-
can and can't do.
Yeah.
It's, yeah.
Is he supposing the town is already, is continued to provide that? Which we have in some years spent that much money to improve the roads. Or is he saying that we need to provide that?
yeah, I'm just going through the numbers, just to try and see if I can kind of figure out, his math methodology here.
Again, maybe there's no development. How does he come to that number?
Right. Eventually, there will be development. The economy's not gonna be in this condition
No,
forever.
but the point is how does he come to that number? Like, you're gonna need this if you do this, when there's really nothing going on.
Oh, there's always a need for maintenance.
Yeah.
Roads will always wear out.
Right, but what I'm saying though is you're never gonna get to the 1,500 to 1,700
In impact fees.
in impact fees
per-
because,
Per single unit dwelling.
right, because you're not developing that.
Well, a single unit family dwelling, single family dwelling would be, hit with impact fees of that range. And
Understood,
if you're
but-
building more and more of those, that accumulates.
Agreed, but at this moment in time, we're not. So to say we need this much per single family dwelling and the town's support of this amount of money to accomplish our need.
Well, at
But if-
current spending levels, the
Problem is
Yeah, the
you're
roads could take
commingling an
27 years.
existing
Agreed.
need for maintenance compared to growth. Again,
yeah.
I like that commingle.
So,
We've gotta
If-
find out exactly what he's thinking.
if you look at table 2.9, road fee model B1, line number M,
I don't like that connotation.
What page is that?
page 30. In that particular one, you can see that the math exercise here to derive at, the improvement cost per trip, is factored based upon a idealistic, annual budget amount for the road improvement program
380,000 per
at
year.
380,000 per year. So perhaps one question would be, could he
But-
revise based upon current budget levels? And this is putting the whole maintenance question aside.
Yeah, but he's saying that this is a RSMS improvement program, 20-year expenditure at 380 per year.
Which is not reflective of current spending?
No,
Right.
Right.
Right. So how would that change?
well, that's the point. If it's 170 a year, which is typically what we spend, then that impact fee would double.
Out of necessity.
If you were on this program.
No,
No.
because the impact fee is then based upon, he then takes that number, the 20-year total, divides that, or multiplies that by 29% and says that 29% of that number is due to the impacts of new development.
It's
And
2204.
then takes and divides out, based on that proportionate share. So in theory, if I am.
It's roughly half.
It would, yeah, it would cut,
$700 or something.
yeah, it would cut it in half.
But look at what P says. 100, improvement cost allocation per average daily trip, $155.
Right.
That's incredible.
That's a lot of money for a trip to.
It
through
cost me
town.
$1 to get on the highway, pay the toll.
But he's talking most of these trips in town,
Yeah,
not counting going
Yeah.
on the highway.
yeah.
Yeah. There's no highway in town, and everyone leaves town.
But I'm saying, he's saying right in there, in
Yeah.
town.
Yeah.
See, that's one advantage. Most of the 55s,
And why the 29%? What's the rational basis?
Why 29%?
Everyone in town only
Yeah.
uses town roads to get out of town.
no, we don't use them at all.
You have to.
Annandale,
Mhm.
Gilchrist, Pine Creek,
All-
we're all on 3A.
Right.
To get out of town, we don't have to touch a town road.
That's a state road, okay.
Right.
'Cause
He
Kenton
does
was
then
getting-
propose, discounting the rates to factor in that much of your driving would not necessarily be on town roads, but would be on state roads. So he then goes through the math and then says, okay, but you should then discount it because only so much of your driving would actually be on local roads.
The 29% comes from, if you look at line L8, well, that's where it comes up at 29%.
Okay.
So his horizon year is 2030 in this case.
Oh, I see. So it's derived from. Okay. Comes out of those population projection.
So he's saying that it goes up basically 30%, 29%, whatever you want to call it.
Oh,
So he's then saying that the improvement cost over those multiple years is gonna be 7.6 million.
right.
Therefore, 29% of that is 2.2 million. And therefore, he allocates that to,
It's impact fees, yeah, backwards, right?
right,
The problem is he's using 380 per year, or 3.8 million, or 380,000 per year, which gives you an erroneous number.
it gives you an inflated number, which
Right.
isn't what we've
Right.
been spending.
Right.
We get 169,000 and some change in highway block grant money, I would call it 170,000. What the state will do with that going forward in the future, only God knows. And it depends on what we wanna do with, as a community going forward. If you also look, there's roughly $25,000 that we put away in the budget for road maintenance, so 25 plus 170,
It's under 2, yeah.
yeah, call it 200,000 for round figures, I mean, if you wanna call it that. Pretty soon we'll be invaded by Russia.
I don't think Russia wants us.
The roads aren't good enough.
I think maintenance would be astronomical.
Yeah. Exactly.
Oh, goodness.
Yeah, look at the Litchfield thing,
But anyways, he skewed the numbers by using that higher RSMS
Just looking at the lane mile Model A, I'm kind of working backwards. In the methodology for calculation there. This one does not use,
You're on table 11, 2-5.
2-4.
Oh.
This one does not look at what funding levels are and talks about the cost to repair or replace.
I'm not sure that his number's correct. I can remember getting numbers 2 years ago from Charbonneau for recovery costs. Of $122
For linear foot.
a linear foot.
Right.
Maybe I'm wrong with that.
No, he does make a comment in here that it's based on reclamation as opposed to new construction. So that might be the difference.
See, and he's also figuring on the fully reclaimed road, which I'm not sure is a valid assumption either. I mean, you could do an overlay,
Right.
or you could do crack filling for a whole bunch of years and avoid the cost of reclamation. Why is he picking reclamation? Assuming that we're using the same definition, reclamation to me is removing the tar,
Yeah.
digging out the sub-road,
Mhm.
replacing the sub-road, rebuilding the tar, and then rebuilding the shoulders,
Yeah, it says below the table filled out for reclamation, so I think your assumption is safe.
And he's applying that survey again, the 2002 road conditions.
Right.
And at that, right, and those numbers then, the first thing you need to do is get a new survey. One of the roads you may have completed could be in huge disrepair, you know, so that changes you.
Well, he did note that we did a bunch of it.
He did, but that doesn't really mean that, I mean, does he have good numbers on that? Is it still, you know, a good road, or is, you know, I can tell you that North Albuquerque right now is crazy.
A little washboarding going on.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, back in 2002, Albuquerque didn't even go all the way
Uh-huh.
through.
Yeah.
Things have changed quite a bit.
2006.
You should have seen it in 1985.
I've heard.
Dirt,
Yeah.
There were sections of the road that were dirt.
by ponds.
But
That's where
Moved here
Roland's
back when there
good
was still a
drainage
stop
is.
sign at Nesson-Cake. That's about as far back as I go. Anything further on roads? We've got a lot from Mr. Mayberry next meeting.
Any questions?
we call it.
Andy.
Erin?
No, I can't give you an indication, at least in my mind, as to which is the best model to go with. I still have questions on it. Yeah, I'm sure you can address them. Like I said, to me, on the square foot models or the impact fees for the schools and stuff, I don't care whether we go square foot of bedrooms or whatever the case may be, or housing types. And I'm still interested in how he justifies impact fees for maintenance. I've read the impact fees stuff several times in the RSA's, and I don't see it, but he does it more than I do.
Unless anybody challenges them, who's to stop them?
Well, sooner or later we go to court.
No, that's my point, is, you know, if,
I just find it fascinating, like I said earlier, that Lebanon doesn't have a impact fees.
other than the development, or the developer screaming high heaven,
Right.
who's gonna complain unless, you know, who's gonna take it to court?
Just the developer.
I mean, after all, there's an end user getting money, right? So who's really gonna complain?
Man, whoever's opening their wallet to pay for it's gonna be the one that complains.
Well, it's an indirect tax, so in the end, it's
Yeah.
the homeowner, but
Yeah.
do they even understand it all? They're not complaining, they don't even know they,
It's all part of the price of the house.
yeah. So improper usage of, or a proper usage of impact fees is relegated to scrupulous men. Yep.
We ready to move on?
Yep.
Next item on the agenda this evening is to approve the minutes from the February 4th meeting. Ross.
Going backwards.
Hmm?
Did you want me to do anything with his comments on the ordinance?
Oh, yes, please. Yeah, let's
Okay.
let's step back and review that. I'm sorry.
No, we don't need to go into in any depth. I was gonna offer that I could kind of sit and try and work through his comments and try marking up the ordinance and kind of give you the kind of alternative options in the margins again as one approach rather than sit with two documents side by side, but I wanted
That works very well for me.
directive first. Okay. And now having gone through this part, I know areas where you've got some red flags that I'll look for, in his comments.
Good, thank you.
Thank you.
We on the meeting minutes?
Yes. Sorry.
Interesting how last month's and this month's are on the same days,
Yeah.
4th and 18th.
Yeah, funny how February and March
Every
line up like
year.
that.
Isn't that crazy?
I saw nothing in the minutes that I flagged. Anyone seen anything that needs correction or is everything okay?
Mm-hmm. Motion to accept the minutes?
I have a motion
Second?
and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Abstain?
Abstain.
Motion carries 502. Where did I put my agenda? Any other business?
Yeah, I was wondering if we could get an update on the hoot nanny you guys had down with Hudson?
Maybe.
Yes.
Nice.
NRPC presented a great package of information about the future build-out of the region, the interaction between the various communities. What else? I was looking over the map today, too. What am I forgetting? It's very informative. Tom, help me out.
Yep. Basically, all the stuff, a lot of it was on the benefits that NRPC has for us on all the programs. We get into transportation a little bit, get into some of the problems that the different communities have, that we all have, and how we go about them. It was interesting to see how they run their meeting, and we picked up a few pointers there. And it's something that we're looking at doing maybe once or twice a year at different locations. Because we did find that a lot of the things that come up with them, we run up against, and vice versa. So,
Just a quick summary of what was presented. Carrie just did an overview of the services that NRPC provides to municipalities. Then I covered some basic demographic trends that we've seen in the last decade in the region. And then Sarah Siskavich, who runs our GIS programs, presented a preliminary build-out findings, and as part of that, what our GIS team worked on was first mapping just generally what all of the zoning ordinances in the region look like when they're placed up against each other. It gives you an opportunity to see how you and your neighbors might be competing, working at odds, or having mutually supported objectives. You can see if you've got something zoned to be low density residential, and your neighbor then put their industrial development right there next to your residential. Just one of those kind of opportunities to step back and look at that. Also looked at natural development constraints, and then said, okay, knowing what current growth rates are projected to be over the next 30 years, with basic zoning allowances of what you're allowed to build versus natural constraints, what might that look like? And so it just drops some dots on the map to simulate the projected growth in 30 years and where that might land. It's randomized based on the computer model. And then we also said, okay, just take the growth rate off and just said complete build out. What would it look like? And it's just a chance for towns to step back and say, do our zoning ordinances and do our regulations yield the image that we have for our community in the next 30 years? And so that was the synopsis of that. And then the boards just took a few minutes to talk about current issues that they're facing, and
like river crossings.
yeah, river crossings came up and different things.
That mapping tool is really, really
Yeah.
impressive.
Yeah.
The more I play with it, the more I learn about the interaction between all of the boundaries of the communities and how everything fits together
Yeah.
in a much broader sense. It's a great tool.
Right, that's a good point. Sarah presented, we just launched, we've got what we call Live Maps. It's an online GIS system for all 13 communities in the region.
Fancy Sim Cities.
Yeah, you can't simulate, but it shows you like on the ground what you have. So it does have the the natural resources are all mapped and in there that you can toggle those layers on and off. Existing land use is in there, so you can toggle that on and off. Zoning is in there. And, you know, to the best ability possible, we've tried to kind of standardize data sets between municipalities so that, you know, when one town says X and the town next to it says Y, we look at it and say, are they actually talking about the same thing? Because, you know, every town's got a different name for something. So we, you know, sat there and tried to like match everything up from town to town so that it'd be comparable when you're comparing your community to the next. So it was,
Great
yeah, so the
tool.
live maps is pretty cool, and it is there online. If you don't have the link, we can get it to you. I think, Joan, you forwarded it to the board, I'm pretty sure.
I think I did.
There's a link to it on the NRPC's website, too.
Yes, you are right. Yeah.
Is there any other business?
I have one question on home occupations. In the ordinance, it says home occupations shall register with the planning board annually upon receipt of the registration forms from the board. So I don't think the board has to approve them all. I think you'd just sign them if there's been no changes.
Right. That's how we've handled it in the past.
Well, they went to the whole motion, but I don't think you need to do that. I think that, you know, you can just look at them and say if there are no changes.
I thought last year we just handed me a whole bunch that I had to sign, acknowledging that we received them.
I think you
Could
did
be.
like a batch motion, or did you? No, you did them one at a time.
Recently. But anyway, I don't think you have to do that. I think you can just sign them.
Do we even worry about, like, for instance, a business is supposed to register with the Secretary of State? Do we even worry about that at all?
Not to my knowledge, no. That's between the
Them and the-
business owner and
yeah.
the state.
No, I'm just curious.
For our interests, their impact on the community, as a home occupation is what we care about.
That's basically for incorporating, so.
Yeah. That's beyond the scope of our oversight.
Just checking.
That's all I have.
Okay, thanks. I do have an item under other business. Next week is town voting, and the following week will be our regular annual planning board meeting, at which time you guys get to choose a chairman and a vice chairman. And I thank you for the opportunity to be your chairman these past couple of years. I will not be standing for reappointment to that role.
We're gonna nominate Butch anyway.
You can try. I can't promise to be any more effective than I have been, and I don't feel like I've been very effective so far. But please give some thought to taking the chairmanship. I'd be happy to support whoever sits in this chair in the future.
Now, will you be chairing the 18th meeting, though?
My intention is to open the meeting and begin the deliberations for the board's annual meeting, after which time we will have the seat shift, and whoever is chair
At the
from that
beginning
point
of the
forward will chair the remainder of that meeting. Not that I'm in a hurry to get out of the chair.
Yeah, right.
So it's this chair, so what? I mean, what does it matter?
Yeah.
You sit there.
Yeah, lately it seems my family's not getting the level of attention from me that they deserve, so I'm going to step back from some of my responsibilities.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all I have. If there's no other business, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
Somebody,
I have a motion
Second.
and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Oppose? Abstain? Thank you very much. This meeting is now adjourned. Have a good night. Our next meeting will be in 2 weeks on March 18th.